they are no longer the laughingstock of the NBA.
Paul, the lob.
Did the expectations, were they ever too heavy for this team?
No, we didn't need them. That's the bottom line.
Are the Clippers unraveling?
The Clippers choked.
The stepchild of Los Angeles. The Clippers turned back into the Clippers of old.
Amidst the shadows of LA and prosperous hope year-round, the Clippers have failed to break their enduring curse. In the last 13 seasons, they boast the second best win percentage in the entire league, only behind the Warriors but ahead of the likes of Boston and Miami, but with absolutely nothing to show for it. Amongst two eras of super teams in LA, both have come back with no silverware, and for a good part of a decade, these teams were title contenders. Yet through superstar playoff collapses, never-ending injuries and some bad luck, the Clippers have never gotten over the hump. And with a big investment in their current core of aging superstars, their window at the top of the standings may be over. Put simply, it's been over a decade of disappointment. Prior to the NBA lockout, well, the Clippers were an emblem of failure, a sad history, and victims of cheap, short-sighted ownership, with only a handful of playoff runs in their 40-plus year history. But things were turning for the good. Entering the 2011-12 lockout year, they hit with number 1 pick Blake Griffin a couple years prior, who entered the lockout season off the back of one of the great rookie years, averaging 23 and 11 with an all-star appearance to show for it. Pairing with him in the front court, Deandre Jordan, the 23-year-old just having re-signed on with the Clippers as one of the bright young defenders in the league. But most importantly, they had traded for Chris Paul, at the time for a large package containing one of the best young two-way guards in the league, Eric Gordon, a top pick, and a developing Alpha Camino. But I mean, we're talking about Chris Paul, an established superstar entering the prime years of his career at age 26. You gave the athletic, rim-running front court the greatest offensive mind in the game, capable of manipulating defenses to score or famously throw the lob, the birth of the Lob City Era in LA.
Paul, the lob.
And Chris's impact proved to be noticeable in year 1, leading the Clippers to their best winning percentage of all time with 40 wins, adjusted to 50 with the lockout season. "He put us on the map," said Blake Griffin, and come playoff time in game 1 of the first round, the Clippers had one of the great comebacks.
Ahead to Griffin, who's come back in. Griffin gets the basket and is Bledsoe open from the baseline and hits. Paul racing down the court, finds Young for 3. He's got it! And the Clippers making a run of it down by here's Paul in the corner. Nick Young again. He's got it again! And the Clippers have won it. One of the more remarkable comebacks in playoff history.
Down 24 with 8 minutes left and having lost key starter Caron Butler, well, the magic begun, holding Memphis to 12 straight misses to overcome the 24-point deficit. Thanks to the wizardry of Paul, the Clippers cannot be counted out of games now when trailing in the fourth quarter. Well, we'll see how that ages, but that's for later. For now, the underdogs would hold on for the series, but the quick, exuberant Clippers would meet their match in the second round against the solid but unathletic and aging Spurs, as the Spurs would continue their win streak to 18 in a row to sweep the Clippers. The season's on-the-fly makeover had to be considered a success, but now Paul entered the last year of his contract and the Clippers had to prove their worth. Well, they re-signed Blake Griffin for 5 years, ensuring Paul had his All-NBA second-team running mate, as well as adding Jamal Crawford and Matt Barnes, both key pieces off the bench. The Clippers were both deep and star-loaded, and would somehow eclipse expectations in the regular season with 56 wins in a ridiculously strong West. Coming with it, unprecedented hope in LA. But up against a determined Memphis team after last year's loss, the team didn't show up. Marc Gasol and Zach Randolph bullied the Clippers' poor post defense. Paul, who had never had much postseason success, well, this year was particularly painful. Up 2-0, they crumbled. Well, not Chris Paul, but his teammates did. Blake Griffin part of the ladder. Many believing he'd taken a step back through the year as they waited for him to take the next step into the truly elite category that had been anticipated for a while. His defense and perimeter shot leaving a lot to be desired. But the young core had plenty of gas left and seemingly convinced Chris Paul to sign on. But each year, Paul's contract increased $1.4 million, and they edged closer to Deandre Jordan's contract negotiations that would begin in 2015. Their window was now. Their man to put them over the hump in the window? Doc Rivers, their newly appointed head coach. Coming with him, JJ Redick, as the emergence of Steph Curry saw the league gradually shift towards the perimeter, and JJ Redick was the perfect complementary piece. The regular season went without doubts, 57 wins, a franchise record, Chris Paul All-NBA in defense for the third year running, and Blake Griffin no longer the athletic freak, but NBA superstar, finishing third in the MVP as he looked increasingly comfortable moving out from the paint, extending his range. And for a season of championship aspirations that hinged on how much better he could be in the season, well, he answered those critics for now. Despite posing as the experienced team against the up-and-coming Warriors, neither team had won anything. But entering the crucial Game 4, up 2-1 with a chance to take it to 3-1 going back home, owner Donald Sterling was heard on the audio tapes with his mistress, criticizing her for enjoying the company of African Americans around him. Wow, Doc Rivers, an African American man, speaking on behalf of and running an organization owned by a racist owner, in the middle of perhaps his team's best shot at winning a championship.
Last, 3 or 4 days have been very difficult for everybody.
We don't want to play for a guy like this. Now what?
That Doc Rivers told him that if Donald Sterling was still the owner of the team, he would quit.
I am banning Mr. Sterling for life from any association with the Clippers organization or the NBA.
No doubt a tough situation for everyone involved, from the front office down to the players on the court. But the Clippers would scrape away with a Game 7 win against the Warriors, in spite of the bad luck within the organization. Was this finally their turn? Well, maybe, but they were going to have to go through an up-and-coming Thunder team. But Chris Paul came out hot in Game 1 for a playoff career-high 8 threes, coming with it a Game 1 win. But the two teams were evenly matched, and with 18 seconds left, about to go up 3-2 going back home with the conference finals truly in sight, well, Chris Paul had one of the all-time great chokes, losing the ball up 4. What is he doing? Proceeding to foul Westbrook on a 3. I mean, that wasn't a foul, but anyway. And then not getting a shot up, down 1 to win the game. Missing a wide open JJ Redick rotating to the top of the key in the process.
I can't believe CP made these bad decisions.
That was as low as I've ever seen CP.
Everything that happened there at the end is on me.
No surprise they were never able to recover in Game 6, despite going up 16 points in the first half to then concede a 30-10 run, ultimately losing in 6 games.
We were so deflated by that game that we couldn't pick ourselves back up.
The playoffs are where a team's true character is revealed, and the Clippers outed themselves as shook once again with back-to-back blown series leads. And people began to wonder if somehow the Clippers had changed Paul, rather than the other way around. No changes were made in the offseason, and for good reason. The trio of Chris Paul, Blake Griffin and Deandre Jordan is as good as any core group. JJ Redick the perfect complementary piece alongside them. This should be a no-excuse season for the Clippers. Sterling is gone, Rivers is in charge and has been there for a full season. Paul and Griffin now veteran leaders. And so the team moonwalked to 56 wins in the regular season, but no one cared. Their play in April and May now the determining factor for success. So the best offensive team in basketball met a familiar foe in San Antonio in the first round, and parallels could immediately be drawn from last year's loss. 2-2 in the series, a brain-dead Deandre Jordan tipped in a ball that was probably going in, ruling it a basket interference. The sights of a 3-2 series lead quickly dimmed in the opposite direction. Yet the big 3 on the road in Game 6 made sure to not repeat the misery of the previous year, getting it back to 3-3 going back to LA, where the heroics continued into the next game. Chris Paul early in the win-or-go-home game injuring his left hamstring, but with the team's championship hopes on the line in a closing championship window, and more broadly his own legacy of repeated failure, he stayed in the game, giving him 25 points with 10 seconds left. One chance to send them to the second round. CP3 silenced the critics, flipping the notions arising from collapses in previous years. For once, everything went right at the best possible moment. Well, not too soon. Paul's injury was deemed to be severe enough to miss 2 games of the second round, but irrespective of his absence, they split the first 2 games, and adding him to the mix, they cruised to back-to-back blowouts to make it 3-1. Things had never looked better for LA. The conference finals appearance within arm's reach for the first time in franchise history. Yet they couldn't close it out on the road, but it left them all the opportunity to get it done at home with the series at 3-2. And up 19 points with 2 minutes 30 left in the third quarter, it looked more than likely. But the mythical legends of Josh Smith and Corey Brewer would go on a 47-18 run with James Harden benched.
The Clippers collapse.
Ends up going right to Brewer, knocks down the 3. Brewer on the drive, got it to go. 9-point game, now Smith will take the 3 and hit. All even at 102. Houston for the lead. It is Brewer for 3, and he hit it! Corey Brewer!
There should never be a timeline where a past his prime Josh Smith and Corey Brewer outplay prime Chris Paul and Blake Griffin, coming from down 17 with Harden on the bench in front of your own fans. The kind of collapse that leaves an invisible crater in a franchise's psyche, cracking a team's self-belief. A moment that transcends ordinary explanation, as if it was fate. And to no one's surprise, Game 7 added to a long list of postseason failure for the Clippers, as they lost in 7. Chris Paul played well in fairness, and was still carrying an injury. But it's moments like these that unfairly reinforce his legacy of one that wasn't built for the playoffs, considering his consistent shortcomings, who despite his play must take blame due to his superstar status. It's worth noting that the supporting cast of Matt Barnes, JJ Redick and Jamal Crawford shot 31% in the final 2 games of the series. So whilst the focus lies on the big 3, who must of course take blame, the supporting cast failed to uphold their small responsibilities, a lack of self-belief that resided through the entire team. To make matters worse, aside from the Rockets team that they should have beat, and a Warriors team that they beat last year, every single team was beat up. This was their year.
I was so sure that team was going to win a championship.
And in the most Clipper way possible, they blew it. Now 0-7 in conference semi-finals in their entire history. And in a final era-defining offseason, the Clippers did it all wrong. They retained the big 3, having re-signed Deandre Jordan after he verbally agreed to join the Mavericks, bringing the underpaid center of the last 5 years to his value. And now the big 3 players were all making north of $18 million per year. And in spite of bench troubles last year, especially in the second round as they lost their legs, well, they beefed up with veteran Paul Pierce and the tantalizingly erratic talents of Lance Stevenson and Josh Smith. Austin Rivers, the son of the coach, was retained for 2 more seasons despite a poor year, with vocal critics calling the move nepotism, leaving the team with a talented but troubled cast. Either way, they were too talented of a starting 5 to not reap regular season success. For the 4th year running, having 50+ wins, and up 2-1 to the Blazers in the first round, there was a 1-day window of optimism for LA. At 3:29 PM on the 25th of April, it was reported Steph Curry was out 2 weeks with an MCL sprain, having slipped the day before in Game 4. The door had slightly opened for a run in the playoffs.
We had a very small window for about 2.5 hours.
And in the ultimate case of bad luck, only a few hours after Steph Curry's injury was reported, Chris Paul broke his hand on a freak play, and a quarter later, Blake Griffin aggravated a left quad injury. In the span of 20 minutes, the Clippers had lost their 2 stars for the year just as the door for a championship slightly opened. Perhaps it genuinely was fate.
Doc used to always talk about how when one group was kind of together for a long period of time, instead of getting closer together, you end up pointing fingers at each other. There was just so much pettiness.
A team full of egos was finally at crossroads. It was also revealed in a lawsuit by Blake's ex-wife that he didn't know how to handle confrontations and would often go silent.
We were just really passive-aggressive with each other.
Perhaps struggling to deal with the idea that he wasn't the leader of the team. The Clippers were broke, but they didn't break up. Doc Rivers, the head of basketball operations as well as the coach, kept the core of the roster together, and for how many years running, the Clippers aimed to turn potential into reality with this core. Come the end of the year, JJ Redick would be a free agent, while Griffin and Paul can both opt out of their contracts to take advantage of a soaring salary cap, now more than ever. But after starting the season 13-2, everything went downhill. Paul and Griffin both missed 21 games in the year, but again they had a chance to make some noise in the playoffs. But come Game 3 of the first round, tied at 1-1, Blake Griffin suffered a big toe injury of all things, and was ruled out for the year. The Clippers' curse was back, not that it ever left. The worst things happened to them at the worst times. So unsurprisingly, they fell in 7 games. It marked the 5th straight year of a blown playoff lead. Up 2-1 against Memphis in 2013, up 1-0 against the Thunder in 14, up 3-1 to the Rockets in 15, and up 2-0 and 2-1 to the Blazers and Jazz in the years following. The first team to ever blow 5 straight playoff leads. They epitomized the word choke. And finally, on June 28, 2017, Chris Paul was sent to the Houston Rockets in a sign-and trade, in exchange for Lou Williams, Patrick Beverley and Montrezl Harrell, and a future first most notably, and retaining the Italian wing Gallinari in a 3-team trade. And midway through the 2017-18 season, due to injuries to Blake and Gallinari as well as no bench depth, Blake was traded to Detroit for a sizable package. The young duo that bled optimism into a dismal Clippers franchise have both left, marking the end of an inconsistent, exciting, but ultimately failed era of Clippers basketball. The two ending it on poor terms, having squared off during the season.
Your window, it can close so quickly.
No surprise then that the team would finish with 42 wins, missing the playoffs for the first time since 2011. The team was kind of stuck in no man's land, with 2 strong assets after trading their stars to rebuild, but not enough to contend. They'd get Shai Gilgeous-Alexander on draft night and release the remaining pieces of the core group in Austin Rivers and Deandre Jordan. But the new look Clippers were actually really fun. Critics doubting a team led by a 30-year-old Lou Williams off the bench and Gallinari, who had the Clippers injury curse down to a T. But these critics were right to do so, but were proven wrong in the end, as the team scrawled their way to 48 wins, but in the West only getting them as an 8 seed. Against the defending champ Warriors, they set an NBA record for the largest comeback in playoff history, overcoming a 31-point deficit in the third quarter.
Gilgeous-Alexander, Shabbat for 3, bingo!
But in the end, they could never stop KD and lost to the Warriors in 6.
I mean, he's Kevin Durant. I promise we tried.
But in the end, it was refreshing to see a team that gelled well and were underdogs play good basketball. But the aggressive front office eyed larger ambitions than those set out in the prior 2 years. Kawhi's contract had expired, who seek to return back to hometown California, and the Clippers served as possible suitors on the basis they could provide Leonard a worthy co-star. They sent many team employees, including Steve Ballmer, to watch Toronto Raptors games, playing a strange game of cat and mouse with Leonard, but their message got across. They were willing to do anything to sign the mysterious superstar and any co-star. And in a showcase of the player power in the NBA, Paul George, who ordered the possibility of going with Leonard, requested a trade to the Clippers. And shortly after, the two found themselves in LA. The Clippers gave up one of the biggest hauls ever to get George, including 4 unprotected first-rounders, 1 lottery-protected first-rounder, and 2 first-round pick swaps, as well as Shai and Gallinari. But for the Clippers, they had paired 2 superstars in their prime together, one coming off one of the great playoff runs of all time,
Is this the dagger?
the other who just finished top 3 in MVP and DPOY.
And he does. The 3-ball quickly. Got it! And one! My George!
Both with credible talents on both sides of the ball, but neither with any long-term obligations, seeing as they were both eligible for free agency again after the 2020-21 season if they don't exercise their options. But not to mention though, the team retained key rotational pieces in Montrezl Harrell, Lou Williams and Pat Bev, who all proved they could contribute positively to winning basketball. And just like that, the NBA's power structure has shifted, and again the Clippers looked in prime position.
But I like the Clippers right now.
I think it's the Clippers championship to lose this year.
Respect to Steph and Clay. It's not a hard decision for me, Kawhi and Paul George. Only thing in the NBA, in the history of the modern NBA, better than a two-way wing, two two-way wings.
And as we'd seen before, this team was essentially championship or bust in the years with Leonard and George. By far the deepest and most complete team in the league. And they let everyone know about it, almost feeling entitled to a ring.
Prices just went up. Don't talk to us. Don't talk to us.
But as expected, the team was inconsistent through the regular season, with nagging injuries to Paul George and a blasé attitude between the co-stars, often load managing, but they still finished with a record of 49-23, equivalent to 56 wins in a full season, claiming the second seed in the Western Conference, their highest seeded placement in franchise history, a testament to their pure talent on the floor each night. And so the season suspension following the virus gave an unhealthy team time to get healthy, build chemistry, and prep for an expected deep run in the postseason. But that was halted as Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell, and Pat Beverly all left the bubble for personal reasons. But all three arrived in time for the postseason in the bubble, and the MVP caliber Paul George was proven to be back in the seeding games. And so the title favourites looked to be back on track. But up against the inexperienced Mavericks, the title favourites struggled to find their footing. PG struggled with his shot, and the supporting cast hadn't settled either. But it was only the brilliance of Kawhi Leonard, who averaged nearly 33 points on good efficiency per game against the Mavericks, that kept this LA team afloat and progressed them to the next round. They then find themselves infamously up 3-1 in the series against Denver. The co-stars looking to have gelled together.
One win from their first ever appearance in the conference finals, the Clippers are finally looking like the team many thought they could be.
That guy is going to get them to the conference finals tonight.
But as the series irked on, Leonard's gas tank slowly faded, having carried the team for a series and a half, whilst Jokic continued to burn the almost unplayable Montrezl Harrell, well, not in Doc's eyes. So a franchise known for its mortifying postseason history, and that looked poised to rewrite it this season, crumbled. Game 5 collapse.
Murray fakes the three, step back three, good! Hits another one! What a comeback for the Nuggets!
Game 6 collapse.
Torrey Craig wide open for the lead, got it! And Denver has surged ahead.
And in Game 7,
they keep overlooking Denver. They now psychologically own the Clippers.
Shot clock winding down. Murray puts up a three. Bang! Jamal Murray from downtown. It's an 18-point lead. This was a golden opportunity this year.
Silent, stagnant, and with 1,000-yard stares, the Clippers left the court quietly Tuesday night after losing Game 7. The fabled Clippers curse returned to haunt a franchise that hasn't been able to exorcise its playoff demons. The Clippers lost their final 3 games in the series after leading by 16 points in Game 5, 19 points in Game 6, and 12 points in Game 7 respectively, where players for the Clippers couldn't play stints longer than 3 minutes in the fourth quarter before needing a breather. In the biggest game of the season, Leonard uncharacteristically choked. 14 points on 6 of 22 shooting with 0 free throw attempts. George, meanwhile, went 4 for 14 for 10 points. More specifically, having the worst series of his career, ghosting in every second half of the final 3 games when he was needed most. Of course, those two get the blame, but the Clippers debacle was a team effort, with poor contributions all year round. Isn't this just eerie similar to the ghosts of Game 6 in 2015? Something about seeing such a talented Clipper team implode before our eyes and whimper its way out of the playoffs as one of the favourites once again.
The fact of the matter is we didn't live up to that expectation.
Oh, and the Clippers haven't made it out of the second round still, but the core urged they had plenty to give, and so reset began a week after their elimination as Doc Rivers was fired. His 7-year tenure in LA, nothing short of a failure. Ty Lue, the top assistant at the time, served as the replacement. The team also lost 6th Man of the Year Montrezl Harrell, but replaced him with serviceable pieces. But again, they lacked a creative point guard as the team remained heavily reliant on its stars to create and handle the ball. But similar to Lob City, regular season success was irrelevant. Postseason success, the bearing. So come the first round, it was as if LA had reversed the curse. We're down 2-0 going to Dallas. They needed to make history after losing the first 2 games at home. And it was off the back of a Kawhi Leonard masterclass that LA could do so. Most notably scoring 45 points on the road to force Game 7, where they would then take care of business at home. But were things too good to be true in the second round? Down 2-0 against the 1-seeded Utah, it looked as if it was one comeback too many. But going back home, they looked comfortable. Yet the bad luck of the past was still entrenched in the now, as Kawhi went down with an ACL injury. Again, primed to finally make a run at a ring, the Clippers were cruelly met with the injury bug once again. Yet PG had a legacy-altering series concluded by 2 standout games.
But when Kawhi Leonard has gone down, Paul George has stepped up.
Down 25 in Game 6 in the most un-Clippers fashion ever.
Missed the layup. Beverly back out Jackson for 3. Bang! 2-point game. Terrence Mann for 3. Bang! Terrence Mann is unstoppable.
Carried by Paul George and Game 6 Terrence Mann, they came back to advance to their first ever conference finals appearance. The irony in making a first conference finals appearance in franchise history, but you're without your number 1 option due to injury. If that's not the most Clippers luck out there, then I don't know what is. So in spite of a good series by PG in the third round, the star-loaded Clippers quickly looked shallow, where they were overmatched by the Suns in 6 games. But fortunately, seeing as PG signed an extension midway through the year, Kawhi would follow suit in the offseason. But unfortunately, the Clippers were giving him $40 million to rest at home, seeing as he was out for the entire year with his ACL injury. The team rebuilt the surrounding cast, signing the likes of Norman Powell and Robert Covington, who were assuring veterans. Of course, their impact was minimal this year without Kawhi, as the team finished with only 42 wins, with losses to Minnesota and New Orleans to miss the playoffs entirely. With Kawhi out, this was expected. The team gearing up for another run in 2022-23. To help with it were veterans Westbrook and Eric Gordon. But again, it looked all too familiar for LA, relying on a superstar that says he wants to play but so often doesn't. It's difficult to develop any chemistry and cohesion on the court as a result. There was no reason this team shouldn't have finished higher than the 5th seed. But you know what's coming. PG sprained his knee leading up to the playoffs, and a 2 to 3 week injury quickly spiraled into a season-ending one. And as one falls, so does the other, where Kawhi was ruled out of the first round against the Suns after injuring his knee in games 1 and 2. Of course, while he was playing his best basketball in years, after going for back-to-back 30-point games and finally looking healthy and ready to go. And thus, first-round failure was inevitable. The 2 co-stars, likened for their ability to work off each other, never got to play with each other.
Last time Paul George and Kawhi played in a playoff game together, this can't be. 676 days.
Yet in this past year, the front office has invested everything in this core, going after an aging James Harden in the offseason, at the expense of more picks and rotational pieces. Any option of rebuilding was gone. This is their team. For better or worse, the Clippers are now married to a 32-year-old Leonard, a 33-year-old Paul George, and a 34-year-old James Harden until the wheels fall off. For now, this team was better than years prior, winning 51 games in a tough West. So whilst the media and fans put all the pressure on LA, poised for a postseason run, comments by Paul George were questionable.
The older I've gotten, the less pressure it's been. You train for these moments to where, you know, if you fail, you fail.
If you fail, you can't fail. But you can lose, but you got to compete.
But either way, the Clippers had their yearly injury woes. This time, Kawhi Leonard, as expected to be honest, who missed the last 8 games of the regular season with knee inflammation and was held out of Game 1 of the first round against the Mavs for the same reason. Kawhi is an all-time great with nothing left to prove, don't get it twisted. But there's no doubt his injury woes have cost this team year after year. Despite having won Game 1 without him, his return meant little in Game 2 as he looked a former shell of his offensive self. and PG was outplayed by the most infamous of playoff droppers in James Harden, where his ability to perform in the playoffs looked more questionable than ever, as his time as the truly elite player he can be may be over, as the Clippers crumbled in 6. The wheels had fallen off for the Clippers, and this time maybe for good. Like in 2015 and 2020, the Clippers had prime chances to bring glory home, but blatant chokes have simply cost them, and bad luck and injuries have derailed the remaining years. So as the credits roll on another chapter of Clippers basketball, the reminiscence of shattered dreams and missed opportunities linger in the Staples Center. With each playoff collapse and injury-cursed season, the weight of past failures loom ever heavier, casting a long shadow over a franchise desperate for any redemption. Despite the influx of talent over the years, the Clippers remain haunted by the ghosts of their own potential.